Wendy in Gravity Falls is a character who fundamentally embodies the traits that Dipper and Mabel most wish that they had, and yet they manage to inspire her as well, and she is better because of her time spent with them over the summer, just as they find more meaning and significance in their lives because of the time that they spend with her. Wendy is an aspirational figure for the kids in a way that many teenagers are to children in the Dipper Mabel age range, this tween age range where they're not kids anymore. They're not merely school children acting on initial impulses. They start to think more, and they are increasingly conscious of not simply being little kids, and yet they don't quite know what adolescence is going to be. And so they see someone like Wendy, and she helps guide them and reassure them to an extent. Of course, for Dipper, Wendy is his first crush. First real deep crush worth pursuing, and pursue it he does. And it fails, his pursuit fails, but he's ultimately better for it. Wendy is genuinely a cool person. Even if she were less cool, the kids would still idolize her to an extent, but she is genuinely someone worth admiring. She is not the smartest person in the world, but she's also not dumb. She's quite athletic, even if she's a bit lazy. Above all, she has the capacity to diffuse anxiety, to fundamentally reassure people that things are going to be alright, to treat them with tact and maturity and enough understanding to give them that sense of calm that they really need. This is showcased very well in the case of Dipper when she has to let him down, and she does a quite remarkable job at doing so. She does care about him, and she does like him as a friend, and she understands how he's feeling and how uncomfortable this experience is for him, and so she tries to diffuse that uncomfortability. She's very good at that. Which is interesting because she admits that she is much more stressed than she lets on. There are moments when that stress emerges, and she doesn't always know what to do with it. She is an imperfect person. She is not this simple ideal that the kids make of her. An important example of her anxieties comes in the Dipper and Mabel versus the Future episode, when Mabel is wanting reassurance about high school and wanting to believe that high school is going to be okay, which of course it will, despite its challenges. But Wendy is not necessarily at her best in that episode. She is herself very stressed and very anxious, and that spills out, and she spins Mabel this horror story about high school. And certainly this is true to an extent, certainly for Wendy. She does not seem like the kind of person who would like school. She is not the kind of person who is passionate about studying, nor is she particularly disciplined in other aspects of her life. That doesn't mean she's a bad person. She's certainly not. But she is being honest when she talks about her bad experiences in school, and certainly there are a lot of unfortunate things. High school is not some perfect utopia, but it's also not some horrible nightmare world. I personally found high school to be significantly less catty, let's say, gossipy than middle school. People are a bit more grown up, at least, and they're starting to actually pursue the things they care about in life. But more importantly, Mabel is in this episode in desperate need of reassurance, and Wendy does not give her that. Which is rare because Wendy usually does. She usually, without being try hard about it, without being too overly enthusiastic in a way that would read to the kids as false or transparent, or too much like an adult giving them abstract reassurance. Without any of that, she manages usually to reassure the kids that they are going to be okay. And as importantly, she embodies for them a kind of ideal, this kind of sang-froid, slightly disaffected, completely unflappable cool that they kind of want, that they kind of admire in Wendy because they admire that as a quality they want for themselves. Jung talks quite eloquently about examples like this. About a kind of magnetism toward someone. Not necessarily romantic, though it can be. That fundamentally comes from the person seeming to possess a quality that we want. It's not necessarily that we want to be them, but it kind of is. It's that we want that aspect of themselves in our own lives. And for Jung, an important step to overcoming a challenge like this is to ultimately realize that this apparent discrepancy between the self and other is fundamentally oversimplistic. It's an opposition that is not true in the real fundamental nature of things. There is a unity and a oneness between people that is fundamentally ignored by this yearning for the qualities that someone else possesses. That's not to say that recognizing that, say, I am one with Franklin Roosevelt, that we are both human beings and that experience a lot of the same anxieties, stresses, and passions, gives me Franklin Roosevelt's charisma and thoughtfulness and ability to inspire people. But nonetheless, there is the sense that whatever the apparent divisions between us, between people of different countries, different sexes, different cultures, between the living and the dead, there is nonetheless this oneness. We are not disconnected from the great qualities and the great failings of others as much as we would like. The border between the self and other is permeable. We are inevitably interlinked with them. And so this deep envy for someone, or this deep longing aspiration to be someone, this deep respect and admiration for someone, are both, for someone like Jung, similar, and they're both fallacious. They're overly simplistic in the divide they create between self and other. These qualities that we admire in someone, we can have them too, to an extent, once we stop seeing ourselves as these little isolated beings completely cut off from the qualities that we ascribe others as having. We can have many of their good qualities, and they can have many of our faults and failings. Wendy ultimately responds quite well to being idealized as much as she is. In a way, it kind of helps her. She is someone who is very driven by this desire for authenticity in all things, for, quote-unquote realness. Wendy, in the original concept for the show, was supposed to be kind of this dorky hippie type. Very much a hipster kind of person, befitting the Oregon location, which perhaps better explains why she's with the very kind of goth, hipstery Robbie. And though a lot of those aspects of her character were discarded and she was ultimately made much cooler, she still has that deep valorization of authenticity. I love the moment when she's upset at Robbie, not simply because he tried to mind control her, but as importantly for her because he said he was making these authentic songs from the heart, and really he was just getting them from elsewhere. And yet she herself is not entirely authentic. She is not fully 100% the kind of person that the kids think of her as, but that ideal that they have of her ultimately inspires her to try to live up to that ideal, try to be more earthy, honest, forthright, authentic with her life, which she ultimately is by the end point of the show. She goes through enough challenges that she is more ready to face the stresses of ordinary life, of ordinary being in the world. It is not that her life is perfect or that her character fundamentally changes drastically throughout the course of the show. She is more or less the same person at the end of the show as in the beginning. She certainly does not change as much as, say, Dipper or Mabel. Certainly not as much as someone like Pacifica. But nonetheless, she gains a deep respect for Dipper and Mabel, even though they're these kind of weird kids. She really admires their bravery, their earnestness, their courage. She comes in a unexpected way, perhaps, to admire them as much as they admire her. She learns from them. And she's ultimately lifted out of her ennui, living a rather repetitive life in an ostensibly boring town, working a tedious, typical high school job at the Mystery Shack, and feeling a kind of disconnection from her passionate lumberjack family. she learns to really fall in love with life again, to really enjoy the crazy experiences it offers, to drop her cynicism a bit and be a bit more open, a bit more earnest, to really embody to a greater extent that passionate authenticity and complete honesty about things that the kids very much believe she already has and they want for themselves to an extent. Wendy wants that too, and to a certain extent she has it more by the end of the show. She is closer to living up to the ideals that the kids have of her. She is very good to them, and they are ultimately very good for her as an individual. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can, and you want to see more videos like this before anyone else. Keep watching Gravity Falls. It's a great show and one that very much rewards constant rewatching. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.